Hello, I'm Steven,
And I'm Aaron.
and we've just seen Queen of the Ring, new film that's out in theaters right now, starring Emily Bett Rickards, Josh Lucas, Walton Goggins, and it is directed by Ash Avildsen. The director of this film is Ash Avildsen, who is the son of John G. Avildsen, who is the director of Rocky.
Oh, oh no.
You know exactly where I'm going with this.
I,
Did Ash Avildsen do for professional wrestling what John G. Avildsen did for boxing?
I knew that last name looked so familiar. I did not know that they were related like that or that was the connection. Okay, so I guess we'll start with the fact that to different degrees we're both fans of professional wrestling
Correct.
as an industry and as like a form of entertainment. I had never heard of this movie until like a week ago when you told me that it existed, but you told me to kind of not read anything about it. So I started to wonder why, like, there had to be some reason or some kind of surprise in the movie. So I was thinking a few things. Like an actress that you really like is in the movie, or Jim Cornette is probably in the movie somewhere because it's a historical wrestling film. It's like, okay, that seems like something Corny would like to do, and they'd probably reach out to him to appear in. And he does indeed appear in the movie for like 2 minutes.
Yeah, he has a minor supporting role as the NWA commissioner.
So yeah, you were the one that brought me to watch this movie. At what point did you realize that you had made a big mistake?
I had a feeling that I was not going to be setting foot into a cinematic gold mine when I saw the poster. I think you and I have seen enough movies that we have a kind of superpower where we can kind of tell where something is going to go right or wrong just by the quality of the poster or the marketing. I didn't think it was going to be this bad, though.
Yeah, to answer your question, no, this does not do for wrestling movies what John G did for boxing movies.
Kind of a travesty.
This was awful, like in so many ways.
It did not start out totally awful. Here was my experience with it. For like the first hour or so, my opinion was oscillating frequently between this is okay, this is hokey, this is bad, this is okay, that was good, this is bad. And then there came a point where it just self destructed and was maimed beyond any measure of repair.
Yeah, I wish I could even be that generous to it. Almost right from the beginning, I felt like something was wrong. The acting and the dialogue is so hokey and cheesy and corny.
Those are exactly the words I was thinking. Now, here's the thing. Here's the reason why I didn't totally turn on this movie from the jump. It did start out very cheesy and hokey, but I started to wonder, is this trying to be a modern movie with the sensibilities of a film from the 1950s, and they're trying to invoke that feeling in the dialogue? Because that can work. The problem is the characters in this movie, the actors in this movie, have to say dialogue that Daniel Day-Lewis would struggle to find the truth in.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, okay, it is 1954, and they are trying to kind of like invoke the time period with the way they speak and the way they deliver the lines, but the dialogue and the writing is so like simplistic
Ham-fisted.
and ham-fisted and in your face. And if you're somebody who's familiar with professional wrestling, just egregiously terrible to listen to when you'll hear a character make a reference to wrestling terminology like a shoot or a work or kayfabe, and then you have to listen to somebody else ask the characters in the movie, what's kayfabe mean? What's shoot mean? And then you have to listen to a drawn-out explanation for what those terms mean.
Yeah, that's one of the big problems with the dialogue. They try to acclimate you to the wrestling terminology, and what you can do. The problem is the way it is worked into the script is so inorganic. It feels like a script. It feels unnatural. It's just fairy tale dialogue and not even good fairy tale dialogue.
This honestly feels like the first script that somebody has ever written.
Yeah, I was thinking first draft.
Well, I don't know. You need a good base, to go further than a first draft. This feels like somebody in, I don't know, middle school or high school who's attempting to write a screenplay with like the most basic characters, cardboard cutouts. I guess I should say, like, this is a historical wrestling film revolving around the career of Mildred Burke.
Yeah, the plot can be summed up fairly easy. Mildred Bliss is a waitress who goes to watch the wrestling matches in the night, and she very quickly comes to realize that, oh, this is my destiny. How do we know that?
This is what I'm
Because
supposed to do.
she points at the ring and says, this is my destiny,
Yeah.
which I think that was clue one that, oh, this is probably going to be worse than I expected, because that was a horrible line of dialogue. But, you can recover from that. And do they? No, they don't. Unfortunately, it just gets worse. So she wants to pursue a career in wrestling. So one day, Billy Wolf walks into the diner that Bliss works in with her mother, and Mildred Bliss recognizes Billy Wolf, and she says, I'm a big fan. I want to be a professional wrestler.
He's also a wrestler.
Yes, yes. But obviously, because it's the late 40s, early 50s, he disregards her because she's a woman, and that was illegal in a lot of states
And
back then.
Women wrestling was banned and illegal back in those times.
But she does manage to convince him to take her under his wing and be his protege. And what ensues throughout the first act of this felt like the Mildred Burke speed run.
That's another problem with the movie is
It never breathes.
every single thing and every aspect of her career in life is rushed through. Nothing is ever given any time to kind of breathe or evolve properly.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about it in a little bit, but just the actual creation and filming and editing of this movie is some of the worst I've ever seen.
Agreed. I was thinking of that too.
In a long time on a big screen.
And we haven't really talked about editing yet in one of these reviews, but we are going to talk about this. But yeah, I agree. That was something I noticed too. Every single scene escalates so quickly. Nothing ever breathes. Nothing ever takes its time.
There's also never any fall off after like the peak of the tension. It's just like, okay, escalation. We've reached peak tension, and then we'll just dissolve in a fade out into the next scene, and just like, okay, we didn't get to come down from that at all. So the dramatic tension is just like weird in how it's delivered.
Amateurish.
And then just like back to the story, that it also kind of revolves around the relationship between Mildred and Billy Wolf, and how it's kind of
They marry for convenience because
it's a business opportunity.
Yeah, it's beneficial to business that they be married.
Yeah.
And their relationship is very tumultuous.
Very one-sided and abusive.
He is not a honorable man. He is not a faithful man.
Yeah.
And
he's a carny.
Indeed. And sometimes he is physically abusive, which becomes unintentionally funny because there are 3 scenes in this movie where he gets so mad that he slaps someone or punches someone, and then immediately afterward regrets it and has a melodramatic cry.
Yeah, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. It's like, okay, well, it's happened so many times now that it's becoming comical.
Billy Wolf was portrayed by Josh Lucas in this film, and I felt like he was miscast.
I just don't know about him as an actor. I was willing to give him a chance here, but again, just like the dialogue they have these characters, these actors say, it's not doable. It's not workable.
It's hard to say dialogue that's unsayable. I think that's the thing that holds so many of these actors back, although there are 2 who I do feel do a pretty good job with the flimsy material they are given. Walton Goggins.
Yeah, Walton Goggins randomly appears, which made me perk up for a second because I was, like I said, almost from the very beginning, I was disconnected from the movie. And then he popped up, and I was like, oh, we've actually got, like, actors in here. So, like, please stick around through the rest of the movie.
Yeah, he makes his dialogue believable. He also doesn't have the worst dialogue in the movie, so
Yeah.
that helps. And then the other one was Deborah Ann Wool.
Yeah, she also appears, and it again feels like you're watching.
Gladys Gillum, I think her name is.
Yeah, you're watching an actor who's kind of like digging the role and kind of, creating some energy that doesn't feel completely phony or cheap or phoned in. And for what it's worth, Jim Cornette, for what little he has to do, he does fine enough, I guess. But
I wonder how many people watch this who don't know anything about professional wrestling might look at him and think, yeah, that guy's in the business.
yeah,
That guy actually knows what he's doing.
yeah, and that's the only reason why I feel like he worked at all, because he's been in the business for so long, and he is very much into the wrestling history, and he knows, what's the real deal and how things work.
And you're absolutely right. That is the reason why I brought you to see this. I was listening to Jim Cornette's podcast, of which I am a fan, and he was talking about how he's in a movie all of a sudden, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I had never heard of this, and it was coming out very soon. So I thought it would be funny to bring you to see this and have Jim Cornette suddenly pop up. I guess you could say I was working an angle.
What's a work? What is that? So yeah, just it's about the life and times of the 50s and Mildred Burke's come up and her rise to fame. There's also other famous wrestlers who pop in. Mae Young is in there. There's a few others. Gorgeous George is played.
Oh, that one of the. Here's a great example of some of the just piss poor dialogue in here. Mildred Burke is talking to George Wagner, and he's like a very average looking guy. He's just there's no like personality to his appearance. He's very basic. And then she says to him, "Wrestlers can still be gorgeous, George."
Yeah.
It's like wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
That
yeah.
kind of cheesy crap.
And then later there's a scene between Billy Wolf and Brutus the Barber Beefcake.
Yeah, I think it's Brutus Beefcake.
And
that don't work for me.
Oh my god.
That don't work for me, Brutus, which I can only assume is a reference to the Hulk Hogan line. That's not going to work for me, brother.
Just, again, just horrible dialogue that they think they're being clever with, and they're like winking at the audience. And it's like, if you're trying to sell me on a drama and get me invested in the character, stop doing things that pull me out of it and remind me that this is a movie.
Easter eggs and dialogue.
Yeah, it's just like, it's not a Marvel movie, it's not like laying Easter eggs here and there, and like it's supposed to be a drama.
And during a pivotal scene towards the end of the film between Gorgeous George and Mildred Burke, Gorgeous George is wearing the fakest wig you've ever seen in your life, and you can actually see the actor's real hair poking through the bottom of the wig.
Yeah, it's
amateurish.
It's not like his roots are dark and the rest of his hair is blonde. No, he's straight up wearing a wig on top of his dark hair, and they didn't even bother to conceal it or blend it. It is amateurish.
Usually when you see a bad wig in a movie, the thing that ruins the illusion of it is the mesh, the seam, where the hair blends with the skin. And it's clearly just like a wig just slapped on a man's head.
It's just slapped on his head. It's horrendous. I guess we can briefly touch on the acting, because there's really not much to say. It's bad. It's mostly because of the script, but I think also just a lot of these performances are like overly hammy and overly played up because of the time period.
I feel like it's hard for me to make a judgment on this, because it's like, is it just bad direction, or can you just not say these awful lines and make it sound genuine? Because yeah, there is some talent in here, and a few of the veteran performers do shine a little bit, but for the most part, it's soap opera acting. It's melodrama.
Yeah, exactly. It's melodrama. It's made for TV. It's like Hallmark.
Made for TV was something I thought about frequently throughout this.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, man, this is like if the Hallmark Channel made a movie about wrestling history and it just failed miserably, of course, because it's the Hallmark Channel. Okay, so, like I said, acting, there's really not much to say. The performances are bad to okay, mostly because of the horrible script. But the production on this it's awful. Okay, like the set design is cheap. Anytime they're playing in like an auditorium or like a veterans hall or whatever dining hall or like bigger arenas, it feels like they're in a big black void with a ring in the middle with a couple of benches sitting around with some people filling in. The music decisions are baffling.
Oh man, the soundtrack to this thing is so anachronistic.
It's anachronistic, and it's also like in your face with the song choices. They'll pick songs with lyrics that seem to pertain to whatever's going on in the scene.
They're telegraphing the emotion of the scene through the lyrics of the songs, and most of the songs are just like these really bad generic rock songs. Every now and then, more so in the second half of the film, these are some of the few parts where I did feel actually immersed in the time period. They would actually play a pop song from like the 1950s, and I was like, oh, okay, now I'm there, I'm in the world. But then for the most part, it's just these modern day songs.
Yeah, randomly during, I don't want to spoil anything, but like the drama between Mildred and Billy comes to like a major head in kind of the third act, and it's supposed to be kind of a dark time and very dramatic, and Dust in the Wind randomly plays in the movie, and it's the funniest thing you've ever seen or heard.
Yeah.
I heard the lyrics in the background. I was like,
recognize the music.
is this freaking Dust in the Wind playing right now? Like, what are we doing?
Totally killed the scene.
It seemed like from that point forward, they had completely given up on trying to make this like an actual movie, as far as like the production and the editing and the choices and the direction.
The structure of this thing.
It's never ending.
Yeah.
There's no beginning or middle end. It's just like a beginning and then a giant middle. And there really is no climax.
There came a point when I thought the third act was about to start, and then the movie just kept going.
Yeah.
And when it finally did get to the climax and the announcer said, "It's now time for the main event," I was thinking to myself, you promise?
Yeah. Yeah. This movie is also 2 hours and 15 minutes. This is the longest 2 hours and 15 minutes I think I've ever had to sit through.
Yeah, we just saw Mickey 17, which was 2 hours and 17 minutes, and that felt shorter.
Yeah. Okay, so the production design is cheap and phony and not believable. There's another scene later on in like a hotel where two characters are talking, and it's just a big empty room with carpet on the floor. There's like no other extras. There's no like people in the background doing things. The editing is horrific.
So many dissolves. Sometimes the music will cut off abruptly.
The scenes will fade into the next ones. Like I said, like the dramatic tension is at its peak, and then there's no come down from it or relief or any of the characters having to kind of deal with the fallout of whatever happened in the scene.
There are scenes where I feel they would benefit from no music playing, but then they overlay this obnoxious pop song over it and totally kills it.
The wrestling scenes are all shot horribly, and they have that dreadful music laid on top of it, so you can't get into it because there's no actual drama. It feels like it's played for action rather than tension and drama. Dialogue scenes are worse. They break the 180-degree rule several times in multiple scenes where characters are looking at each other and at a certain angle in the scene because of the scene blocking, and then it will suddenly change and they'll be looking opposite ways or the wrong ways.
Their eye lines don't seem to match.
Their eye lines don't match.
Oh,
characters will teleport.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to bring up. There's a scene where Billy Wolf, Josh Lucas, is talking to Walton Goggins' character, Jack Pfeffer, and he comes up from behind him and puts his arm on his shoulder, and then in the next shot, he's teleported
standing in front of him.
Both you and I were just our minds were blown.
What the hell just happened? He teleported.
They didn't see that? They didn't catch that in editing? Somebody had to cut this together.
Yeah.
Amateurish.
Yeah, just pedestrian at best and amateurish, and
The establishing shots in this, every single establishing shot in this movie is exactly the same. It's a camera pointed in front of the location where the scene takes place, slowly panning in for like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
And sometimes the quality on the establishing shots looks like it was shot on an iPhone or something. It doesn't match.
yeah. Well, I think what they're doing with some of those scenes is they're taking like a static shot of the building or whatever location,
And then they're panning in and animating it basically.
They're panning into it digitally. It's not an like actual zoom. It's it's like Windows Movie Maker looking stuff.
Movie does not strike a good balance between her wrestling career and her tumultuous relationship
Personal
with Billy Wolf. There came a point in the movie, like more than halfway through, well, maybe the halfway point, where Mildred Burke is like doing like a promo talking about how I'm 35 now and I need to pass the torch on, and I realized, oh, there hasn't been a wrestling match in like 35 minutes.
Yeah. Speaking of her being 35, another problem with this movie is the timeline makes no sense and the characters never age.
Yeah, it's like you haven't seen this film yet, but it reminded me a lot of Driving Miss Daisy, where there's a lot of time jumps, and the only indicator that time is moving forward is Dan Aykroyd is like getting progressively older, and the makeup is horrible. But they don't even do that in this movie. Nobody like it gets like any kind of old age makeup or thinning of the hair. Maybe Josh Lucas, maybe, or maybe they just styled his hair slightly different.
And then also, Mildred has a son in the movie, and in the beginning of the movie, he's a baby. And then, like, suddenly he's, like, 10 years old. And then suddenly he's, like, 16, 17 years old. And Billy Wolf also has a son of his own. And the first time we see him, he's probably, like, supposed to be, like, 16, 17, or, 18, however old. Because Billy Wolf is much older than Mildred. But none of these characters ever age. The only one that does is Mildred's son. And it's so awkward because there's also like kind of a thing between Billy Wolf's son and Mildred. So I could never tell how old any character was supposed to be because none of them ever age or look any different except for the son inexplicably. And it also makes you question, like, what time frame does this movie take place in? Is this, like, a 10-year period? Is it a 5-year period? Is it a 15-year period? I have no idea what's going on in this movie ever because of the way it's edited and the way there is no makeup at all for aging these characters.
This film is the antithesis of the Iron Claw.
Yeah, I was thinking about the Iron Claw the whole way through this. It's like, that movie is a historical wrestling film that takes some liberties with its story, yes, but it also feels much more respectful. There was much more effort in time and appreciation given for the material to really sell it and make it work. And I'm pretty sure that movie's also shorter.
That movie also does a better job of demonstrating their legacy and import to the wrestling industry. Yeah. This film is supposed to be an inspiring story about this instrumental figure in the worlds of women's wrestling, and I feel like we don't really see much of Mildred interacting with the public and how she's inspiring people. It's mostly just family melodrama.
Yeah, and Iron Claw also does a better job of kind of explaining the wrestling business without over-explaining it. You just understand it. It just works. It's not that difficult to understand. You don't have to write, several sentences worth of material explaining what kayfabe is or what a work or a shoot is. You just kind of, get it when you see it in the movie. It's an important story to tell, and it's a really interesting story to tell. But, I'm sure they had the best of intentions and props to the actors for, I'm sure, going through wrestling camps and training and, bulking up for the roles. They look good enough and, I'm sure they were trying, but the filmmakers let everybody in this movie down at pretty much every turn, from the script to the direction, to the editing, the musical choices. It just turns this entire thing into a total cheese fest. I don't have really much positive to say about it.
Yeah, outside of Walton Goggins and Deborah Ann Wool and just seeing Jim Cornette, really nothing I can say on the positive side of this. And I do not enjoy saying that. I really wanted this to be good. I had a bad feeling going in that this was not gonna be the masterpiece I would like it to be, but
Yeah, I had no expectations, and I'm still somehow disappointed. And I don't know. I wanted to be on this movie side, but
yeah, so
like
did
I
I.
said, just about from the beginning, I was just like, man, this ain't right. Something is wrong, and it's only getting worse the longer it goes on. It got to a point where I was just like, oh my god, I want to go home. I don't want to watch this anymore.
I was getting pretty tired.
I wasn't getting tired. It was just a tough sit.
Yeah.
Just having to endure like all the problems.
Oh,
of
I
this
don't.
movie.
I don't mean sleepy. I mean just tired of this
well,
movie.
yeah, yeah. It's the longest 2 hours and 15 minutes. It just goes on forever, and the problems with it seem to just get worse the longer it goes on. Like I said, there's a point kind of near the beginning of the third act where they just give up, and they don't even try to direct this thing anymore or make it feel like an actual movie. It's just made for TV melodrama, Hallmark Channel nonsense, using a real story as its selling point, and it's unfortunate because it really undermines the importance and the intrigue of that story.
All in all, a colossal flop.
Yeah.
So, what is your final number grade on a scale of 1 to 10?
I feel like I'm somehow being generous, but I would give it like a 3 out of 10.
I felt like I was being generous, giving this thing a 4.
Yeah, I'm borderline at a 2, but I feel like that's too harsh.
Not the worst thing we've ever seen in our lives. Definitely not even in the top 5, and not even one of the worst theater experiences I've had. But
No,
this is not a good one.
I think this is probably my least favorite movie I watched this year so far, though. Worse than Flight Risk, worse than Companion.
Yeah, I might have to agree. I don't think it's the worst film of the year. Maybe not, but the worst experience. I had the worst time watching this.
I said I kind of hated Companion watching it, but that movie was... It felt like I was watching a movie.
Yeah, at least it was well made.
Yeah, this was just like... I don't want to say low effort, but just very, very, very poorly made.
So, that's Queen of the Ring. Don't see it.